If you like easy slates for MLB DFS with a lot of simple answers, tonight's probably not for you. It's a 15-game slate. It's not like it's lacking for pitchers because we do have Trevor Bauer. We've got Carlos Rodon. We've got Tyler Glass now. Alex Wood, I think, is pretty good too. And Erin Nola. We got these good names. The problem is that every single one of the good names I just listed is in a tough matchup. Bauer gets the Giants. It just dropped like a 20 burger on the Reds last night. Glass now gets the Blue Jays, who scored 4 runs in the first against him a couple weeks ago. Rodon gets the Yankees. A lot of good right-handed batters there. Wood gets the Dodgers. Nola gets the Red Sox. So if you're looking for an ace pitcher in an easy matchup, play on Saturday instead, because you're not going to find it here today. But what I think that we do have is a couple of clear routes to utilize here in ways we can navigate around those tough matchups and actually get exposure to Coors Field for tonight. So let's dive on in and get you set for Friday's slate. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sanas. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to break down Friday's 15-game main slate. Yes, it is a full one. Lock is set for 7:05 tonight. Couple of weather notes here. Winds are blowing in from left field at 18 miles per hour in Dunedin for the Rays and the Blue Jays. It's been that way the past 2 nights, too. Didn't seem to make a big difference, so I would not alter anything too much based on that. Winds are blowing out at 17 miles per hour at Coors Field. Yeah, that Coors Field. For the Rockies and the Diamondbacks, it's also 77 degrees, so good hitting weather at Coors Field tonight, and we're going to be there for the top stack today. Winds are out at 13 miles per hour in Los Angeles, or Anaheim, I guess, for the Angels and the Athletics. Give a slight bump to bats there, but nothing too crazy because it is a little bit cooler there than it is elsewhere. So win the main story for today. Coors, a good place to stack, and we will be talking about that later on. Before we dive into that, though, quick scheduling announcement that today we will not have the 4 p.m. Q&A. Dr. Disrespect jumping on the FanDuel YouTube page. She'll be breaking down a lineup for the play-in games tonight. So if you want a fun lineup there, go to the FanDuel YouTube page. Check out Dr. Disrespect. So no 4 p.m. stream. As always, if you have questions for me, you can hit me up on Twitter, Jim Sanas there. But no 4 p.m. stream today. We're back once again on Monday to break that down. As far as the DFS side of things go, here on the podcast side of things, we have the NASCAR Heat Check coming up at 10:30 on YouTube. We also have a UFC podcast already posted up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed via Austin Swain. Get his insights on Saturday's card there. I'll talk NASCAR later on. That'll go up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed later today. So make sure you are subscribed there. And also, if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review. Talk about the play-in tournament with Dr. Disrespect. And you also get a fun way to play the play-in tournament via FanDuel and Netflix. They have teamed up to add another layer of excitement to the win or go home round. It's the FanDuel free NBA play-in contest presented by Netflix's Army of the Dead, a free-to-play NBA fantasy contest that has spanned all 4 nights, wrapping up tonight for that play-in tournament. Contests are simple. Go to FanDuel.com, click the banner, fill out your best lineup, stay under the salary cap, and compete against other users in the contest for your shot at $25,000 in cash prizes. And as an added element, Netflix is providing an Army of the Dead bonus, where if a lower-seeded team comes back from the dead and wins their matchup, all users who participate in the contest on that night will receive a voucher to play in a paid NBA playoff contest and earn the right to take home the ultimate prize, a big payday, courtesy of the Army of the Dead. The games tip off in just a few hours, so head to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Fantasy app and enter the free NBA play-in contest presented by Netflix's Army of the Dead today. And check out Army of the Dead, starring Dave Bautista, Ella Purnell, and Amari Hardwick, only on Netflix right now. After you listen to this podcast, you can turn it on right now. It is available on Netflix right now. Eligibility restrictions apply. Pitching preview for this Friday main slate. Trevor Bauer is the highest salaried pitcher at $11,800. Tyler Glass now is $11,000. Carlos Rodon is $10,400. We got Steven Strasburg coming off the injury list. He is $10,200. Alex Wood is $9,100. Erin Nola is $9,000. We have Ian Anderson, Kyle Gibson as the others at $8,000 or higher. Potentially Marcus Stroman too. The Mets have not officially announced their starter for today. Could be Stroman. If he is also in that 8,000 range, but that's not official via the Mets as of yet. So with these high salaried pitchers, I think my number one pitcher for today is going to be actually a value play. And we'll talk about him in a second. And part of that's because I want to get to Coors Field. But if you are going to dabble in the studs, I think that your best route is via Trevor Bauer at 11-8. Now, this comes from someone who lost money yesterday because I used Tyler Mahle against this very same Giants team. I would have done better had I left that slot blank because he scored -9 points. It was bad. Bad recommendation on my part. Bad job by me. And it's possible that could happen again because they're a good offense. The Giants are a decent offense. But I still think Bauer needs to be among the studs, at least at the top of our list for tonight. The Giants, 96 WRC plus against righties. That's okay. They have more upside than that because they do hit the ball hard, but they strike out. And that's huge for daily fantasy. They have a 29% strikeout rate against righties, which means opposing pitchers have upside, even if their floors are not necessarily great. We can be okay with that because we need upside in DFS. And I don't think Bauer is going to be my cash game option for tonight. He is more of a tournament play. Cash game guy will be the value guy we'll discuss in a second. And Bauer has upside, the upside we want for tournaments. He's been leaning more on his slider instead of his cutter over his past 5 starts and hasn't had any ill effects of that. He has a 2.90 skill interactive ERA with a 34% strikeout rate. He is letting up some hard contact. And again, the Giants provide some of that themselves. I just don't think it's enough to push Bauer off the map. So if we're looking at the high salary guys and tough matchups, I think that Bauer is going to be the number one option, given that he is the highest salary guy on a slate where we do want to stack Coors Field and he's not in the best matchup. I think Bauer will go overlooked. So for tournaments, I think Bauer is a good play. He is not my favorite play there, but I do think that among the studs and tough matchups, Bauer would be number one. Now, I've alluded a couple of times to a value play I like who can allow us to stack Coors Field. I want to go at this game in cash games and tournaments. That's actually Mike Minor, which is probably weird because I believe I stacked against Mike Minor earlier this year, and I was off him because he wasn't getting enough strikeouts. And that was an issue for him last year too, and it made it really tough to get into him. But he's been making some changes as the year has gone along, and he's handled some really tough opponents, and I think that makes him a viable matchup here, or a viable option here, in a matchup with the Detroit Tigers. The big change for Minor is that he has increased his changeup usage, and that's a big pitch for lefties because you got to keep the righties in check, and it's worked out really well for Minor. In this sample, he has a 3.97 skill interactive ERA and a 26% strikeout rate. That's despite having some tough matchups in that time. He's actually faced the White Sox twice in a row, which since the start of last year has been the best offense in baseball against lefties. Even with the injuries this year, it's still been true. They're still number one against lefties. He let up 5 earned runs the first time he faced them, but the second time, Minor was dominant. He was outstanding. He had 7 strikeouts in both games. He also had 9 strikeouts in the first start of this stretch with the increased changeup usage, and that start came against this very same Detroit Tigers team he will face today. It makes sense, too, because the Tigers have a 59 WRC plus against lefties with a 33% strikeout rate. That's worth a big bump up to opposing pitchers, and Minor can take advantage. I probably wouldn't use him in many matchups, especially on a 15-game slate. He's good as a pitcher, but he's not great, and I want great pitchers for DFS, but this is like the best matchup you could possibly concoct. High strikeout team, not doing a whole lot. He's pitching pretty well recently, again, in tough matchups. So if I am filling out one lineup, Mike Minor will be the pitcher in that lineup for tonight, and I will use him to get access to Coors Field. So Mike Minor, $7,600, my number one pitcher for tonight after considering salary, especially given all the tough matchups that the studs have for today. Now, a bit of a middle ground you can take is using a guy between Bauer and Minor, and that's Erin Nola. He's facing the Red Sox, and I really did not want to use Nola in this matchup. When you look at the guys with upside for tonight, they're all in tough spots. So if we're trying to identify guys who have the ceiling to keep pace and be the highest scoring pitcher on the slate, it's really tough to find people in good matchups. We'll talk about Alex Wood in things to watch. He's facing the Dodgers, but I think of the group, of the other studs outside of Bauer in tough matchups, Nola might have the highest upside matchup. He's not a cash game consideration. You're going Minor there, but I do think Nola works for tournaments. And there are 2 reasons for that. And the first one is the Red Sox will strike out a bit. They have a 24% strikeout rate against righties. They don't walk a lot. It's a 7% walk rate. Both those things can give upside. The strikeout rate via increasing strikeouts and the walk rate by allowing the pitcher to go deeper in the game. That's all led to a 111 WRC plus. They're very good. It's scary, and I don't want to go here with most pitchers. This one's just a bit different. So given all the other options elsewhere. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is that Nola is a good all-around pitcher. We talked about this last night with Sandy Alcantara. Sometimes being a good pitcher is enough, and he was outstanding against the Phillies last night. Nola's in that same mold. He's been going back to his sinker a bit over his past 5 starts, but he's still getting strikeouts, so it's not going to bother me that much. He has a 27% strikeout rate in that time, but a 5% walk rate, 6.2% barrel rate against. And that's kind of what you got to do if you're in a tough matchup facing a good offense. You got to be a good all-around pitcher, and Nola checks all the right boxes. So I'm not sure this will work out, and that's why I think you go with Minor for cash games. And if you don't like Minor, I think you're probably trying to get to Bauer. But for tournaments, I can talk myself into Nola pretty easily. He can generate upside. He's $9,000. At $9,000, he will allow you to stack some Coors Field too. So I think Nola is a good enough play to justify looks in tournaments as long as you're okay with the risk. So Erin Nola, number 3 pitcher for me tonight, behind Bauer and Minor. But I think that if you're just doing one lineup or you're doing minimal lineups, I would say go with Mike Minor and allow yourself to have some fun by stacking Coors Fields. Let's talk about why we want to stack Coors Fields. We moved to the stacking section for today. The weather is great, winds out, temperature high enough, and I want to take advantage of that. The Rockies are terrible, and I have used pitchers against them on like 98.7% of the slate so far this year, but they are the optimal way to get exposure to this weather for tonight. They're facing Seth Frankoff, and I'm not entirely sure what to think of him. We have limited data on Frankoff in the big leagues. Over his career, he has 9 1/3 innings in the majors. It's his age 32 season, so he's been here for a while, but not a lot in the majors. Part of that's because he spent 2 years in the KBO. He pitched pretty well there, but he wasn't dominant, I wouldn't say. In the early data in the big leagues, doesn't make him look super overpowering. He had a 10% swing and strike rate in his first start this year. That came against the Nationals, who are not a great offense, and he also made 1 start at AAA. His swing and strike rate there was 12.5%. So if we're trying to figure out what kind of pitcher Frankoff will be, I don't think he's going to be a high strikeout guy. The question is what the batted ball numbers will look like. And that's where we're guessing the most because it takes longer for those to stabilize and things like swinging strike rate. He did get ground balls against the Nationals, didn't in his game in AAA. I would expect Frankoff to be above average there because that was a part of his game when he was younger in the minors. But it is an unknown. And either way, I think that we can get some balls in play here. We can get some balls in play out of the Rockies. So I'm on board with stacking them here. And the pitching tonight with Mike Minor does make that easier, and with Nola as well. So the Rockies, a stack for me, despite the fact they've been totally hideous this entire year. Because the Rockies have been so bad, we do want to make sure we're selective with the guys we're using. We want to make sure they have a path to a ceiling. And the guys I think have a legit good ceiling are Ryan McMahon, Trevor Story, Raimel Tapia, and Garrett Hampson. Charlie Blackmon's not stealing bases anymore. His batted ball numbers are decent, but he's not really barreling the ball. So, like, you want to use Blackmon. He's going to hit high in the order at Coors Field in the spot we want to attack. But I think if I'm prioritizing guys, he's probably going to be a bit lower on my list as a result of the mediocre numbers he's had so far this year. So we're going to rank him a bit lower. I'm willing to use Dom Nunez and CJ Cron too, assuming that they are in there. We'll talk about the Diamondbacks and things to watch, but if you want exposure to Coors, to me, it really is mostly about the Rockies for tonight. Outside of Coors Field, I am on board with the Cubs this evening. They're facing Carlos Martinez, and he has been on the injured list due to an ankle injury, and it's tough to have an injury, especially to an ankle if it's pushing off and stuff like that, but Martinez probably could have used the time off because he was still trying to figure things out before that injury. In the 7 starts, Martinez has a 5.28 skill interactive ERA with a 13% strikeout rate. He's getting some ground balls at a 48% clip, but his barrel rate is higher than average. And when you're letting up that many balls in play, you need to be a standout in that department. Martinez did have a monster start at the beginning of May. He went 8 shutout innings against the Pirates, but the next time out, he let up 5 runs at home against the Rockies. The Cubs are better than both those teams, and I think Martinez is still someone we should stack against when he's facing basically not the Pirates. And the Cubs, firmly good enough to justify that. So they stand out here for me among the non-Coors teams on the slate. The big downside here is that they did just lose Jason Hayward. He was kind of a value guy I leaned on a decent amount against righties. No Hayward for tonight. But among the others, I do think that Ian Happ is worth a look. He had gotten dropped in the order, but has moved back up recently due to injuries elsewhere. He has a 38% hard hit rate against righties this year. He had a big home run yesterday. He's $3,000. I am okay using him as part of stacks. He's not like a big value play. We'll probably get some value plays from the Cubs here, but be selective again. I think that they're like a good secondary stack alongside the Rockies. For our third stack, I am not super eager to stack against Chris Flexon. He does a good job of limiting hard contact, and that's kept things from imploding despite a very low strikeout rate. But there aren't a ton of great options for stacking on this slate. Again, like all the good offenses are facing good pitchers. So we got the Padres facing Flexon, and I think that's enough to get me in here. And I don't think it's entirely stupid to be here either, because in the 7 starts, Flexon has a 14% strikeout rate with a 5% walk rate, which means he's letting up a ball in play about 81% of the time. That's a really big number. He's done a good job with that so far. But his barrel rate is 6.2%, his ground ball rate 47%. Those are good numbers, but are they good enough to keep us from stacking against him with the Padres? I'm not really sure. There have been some rough starts for Flexon so far. He let up 5 earned runs to the Twins, 4 to the Rangers 2 starts ago. So this could go poorly. And I think that it's not the highest conviction stack I've ever recommended here on the podcast, but the Padres are good enough to sit third for me. Now, the value play we've been leaning on for the Padres has been Jake Cronenworth for a very long time. Cronenworth, no longer value. He is $3,300, but I still think he's worth that salary. He has a 14% strikeout rate against righties, a 36% hard hit rate, a 38% fly ball rate, and it's led to good results both overall and in the power department. And he can also swipe some bags. So I'm going to keep on using Cronenworth despite the increased salary. If you're looking for someone who can save you a bit in that department, I think that Erin Nola could wind up being that guy. He's looked decent since he came back from his injury, so you could potentially go there. But I do think that despite the increased salary, I'm still okay with Cronenworth, Jerks, and Profar back from the injured list as well. So I think when you look for some value, Tommy Pham, it's not been a great year by any means, but been a little bit better recently. So Pham, Profar, Nola for value, but I do think that Cronenworth, despite the increased salary, still very much worth it for tonight. Let's finish up with things to watch. The other guy who works in the mid-range of pitcher outside of Erin Nola is Alex Wood. He's facing the Dodgers, which is a tough spot, but I'd rather face him as a lefty than as a righty, because against lefties, they have a 25% strikeout rate, a 91 WRC+. I am guessing that will get better as the year goes along, but there is enough of a window there to give me some hope. Wood has been outstanding this year. He has a 3.17 skill interactive ERA with a 25% strikeout rate. His pitch count has been better than what it was with the Dodgers, and hey, revenge game tonight with Alex Wood facing Los Angeles. So I want to get some exposure to him for sure. I think that he would be more of a lower level play, and I think that I prefer Nola over him by a decent amount, but Wood's still a good play and someone I'm willing to use. But again, Mike Minor, number 1 for today. The plus hitting conditions at Coors Field do benefit the Diamondbacks as well, so I think we should potentially stack them. It's just harder to get jazzed about them than it is the Rockies. That's mostly because they're facing German Marquez. He's been going to his slider as his primary off-speed pitch instead of his curveball over his past 6 starts, and he is really limiting hard contact. In that 6-start sample, the barrel rate against Marquez is 2.4%. His strikeout rate is back up to 25%. So the Diamondbacks work due to the conditions of the park, but they're probably 4th at best for me, whereas the Rockies are 1st. So I would put them below the Cubs and the Padres for tonight. If you want some lower salaried options, you want to get increased wiggle room to get you Trevor Bauer, I check out the Twins. They're facing Tristan McKenzie, and he's not the kind of guy we typically stack against. He gets some strikeouts and he walks guys, which means he allows minimal balls in play, but it leads to results. He has a 5.79 ERA this year. There have been lots of barrels against him. Let up 5 earned runs in 2 of the past 3 starts. And if you look at the barrels per game against McKenzie, he still averages more than 2 barrels allowed per game, despite the minimal balls in play. I think that's enough juice to squeeze here in stacking the Twins. We got Trevor Larnach and Mitch Garver both at minimum salary. I'm on board with that. I would bet Alex Kirilloff is activated off the injured list tonight too. He is $3,000. Couple home runs for him the past 2 nights in his rehab stints. That might squeeze Larnack out, but I would doubt it, given that Larnack just went deep yesterday and the Twins need offense. So I think that Kirilloff, Garver, Larnack should all be in there. And also Miguel Sano, $2,900. His strikeout rate's down to 29% the past week. I'm not saying he's fixed, but he is making more contact. He's improving the areas you want him to improve in a small sample. Power and strikeouts. So not saying that he's better, but I'm not saying he's not. And I think that's interesting for tonight for sure. At $2,900, given the upside he has. So I think the Twins work if you want to be a bit different, save some salary. It is a deviation from our usual type of stacks, but I think that is okay for tonight, given the value they present and given the results against McKenzie so far this year. That is all the time that we have for today. As mentioned, no 4 p.m. stream. So if you have questions for me, hit me up on Twitter. I am at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. Despite the lack of a 4 p.m. stream, we do still have more stuff here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. NASCAR podcast recording at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. That is on the FanDuel YouTube page and up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed immediately after that. Austin Swaim also has you covered with UFC for Saturday's card. Make sure you also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast, and make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your MLB DFS lineups for tonight. Have a fantastic weekend. We'll talk to you once again on Monday. This has been the solo shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.